Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. So this evening's Dharma talk, can you all hear me? This evening's Dharma talk is titled, what is it? The True Student. I think I've given one called The True Teacher. If I haven't, maybe I will. But the True Student. And this could be seen in several ways, not only the spiritual path, but also could be seen as someone studying carpentry. To some extent, at some point, it starts to change and moves away from the mundane considerations of the commonly understood idea about material reality, which is that things are true and untrue. So the true student of carpentry or learning how to do accounting or something like that would follow a set of procedures and would gather information about whatever their activity was, and perhaps even get skills at using power equipment or any number of things. I don't need to go into too much detail there. So hang on just a minute and I'll get this. I want to go back to the gallery view. Otherwise, I'm looking at myself. And of course, the setup we have in the West is you put everybody, no matter what they're, if they get into the class, whether it's a 10th grade geometry or whatever it may be, freshman English, and then it is taught the same way to everyone. And if you, not that some teachers aren't extremely agreeable in working with individual students with their particular issues or even handicaps, it's not common. It's usually just study the material, listen to what I'm saying, being the lecturer, and pass the test, if you can. So quite often this kind of testing, as I'm sure you know, for those of you who have degrees and graduate degrees and all the other things, I don't have those. So therefore I'm qualified to talk about it. I just qualified myself. But I have spent some time in college, so I have a little bit of an idea what that is. The difficulty with that way of educating or teaching is that it's more about controlling people and getting an idea of who's doing what and how good someone is at a particular thing. Mainly, I don't know if I could say mainly, but quite a bit of it is memory. If you can remember anything you're being taught, then you can, when the time comes to take the test, you can probably pass the test. That doesn't mean you have insight beyond the memory situation. Again, all kinds of exceptions to that. Of course, some people memorize the material and just can bring it out, and some people might know and understand the material and yet really have a deeper understanding and a deeper conceptual understanding, and are able to turn the various things that they learn around in such a way that they connect with any given situation that arises, sometimes called creativity. Not tied to their concepts they've learned so much that they can't work with creatively the unexpected situation. That's not always tested. Life usually does that. So this is a mundane way of learning, quite difficult for some people who learn in different ways, who learn more through visual input rather than auditory or conceptual situation known as intellect. The variations there are really, really extensive. They're just can't really, probably could write a book about it, but it would take a long time to gather all that together and say it in a way that is very clear and succinct, and so that we can actually understand what those differences are. I don't want to spend too much time on that. What I do want to spend a little bit of time on talking about, and then I'm delighted to receive your questions around this material. It will help all of us go deeper into the material. We do it together. It's a mutual thing. In fact, in fiction, education is mutual. If it's not mutual, then it's about control and power. Just look around, see who's in power and how do they get there. The true student is, on the spiritual path, is one who is able to really, really receive what is being said or taught without doing much with it other than receiving it. Receive the teachings. Life is suffering, the basic teaching of the Buddha. Life is suffering. The cause is desire. The goal is cessation. The path is train the mind, or Shila Samadhi and Prajna, or Pranya, or the eightfold path, if you wish to go that way, which is even more conceptual. So in some quarters, someone might take a look at this, someone who is very intelligent, and look at this and see life is suffering and immediately conclude, well, this is just a nihilistic approach because of the attachment, not the attachment the Buddha had, but the attachment the temporary student had to concepts, ideas, conclusions, exclusions, and so on. The ego mind needs to get a conclusion as soon as possible. Otherwise, it starts to starve. And when it starts to starve, then other things come up like depression, anxiety, especially anxiety, fear of the unknown, fear of being not disliked, fear of looking bad, pride. And this particular path is about going directly into that. As Trungpa Rinpoche says, march directly into disappointment. Or at least I think I'm quoting him. That's difficult to do just on your own, because why would you even do that? There needs to be some kind of inspiration for any one of us to even step on this kind of a path, this spiritual path of realization, of seeing the true nature of reality. In other words, the true reality of what this is, this what we call a human being, and what this is, the human being, the space in which human beings occur, our environment, other human beings, other beings altogether. So you could say that the student, the true student, is going to be on receive all the time, not necessarily as soon as they get what they're looking at, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking about, immediately start to wind that up into some kind of ball of conclusions about it in order to know what it is. Too soon. The kind of knowledge that happens there is relative knowledge. It's about getting knowledge about something so you can control it, so you can say that you know it, so you can pass a test and all of that. They were even doing that in Vajradhatu when I went to seminary in 1980. They were testing people there to see if they could remember the different schools of Buddhism and whatever they were teaching. Tests. Not a good idea. At the time, I didn't feel that way. I just thought, I'm not going to be good at this because I'm very slow. But slow doesn't mean that I'm stupid. It just means that I look stupid to some people. So the student is always on receive. I'm going to break it down into two parts: receiving what's coming from the apparent world, and receiving what is coming up as your reaction to it, not adding on to it, but notice something happens and you spontaneously have some kind of thought pattern come up. It could be just as simple as a thought pattern that says, well, that's a fire engine going by to a fire. You know what it is. But receiving that and seeing that this is occurring out here, and there's a complement to that, which is your response to it, that helps you keep what? The assumption, the belief that you're separate from that fire truck. You're separate from, because you just named it. So a true student is going to be on receive. The worst negative feeling that arises in their mind, instead of immediately leaving what's arising in the mind stream and blaming, just like in the outer world, immediately taking someone who has gone awry, who is having difficulty with their life, who commits a crime, and immediately blaming them, instead of seeing the deep, deep dependent origination that is happening in any kind of event, no matter what it is. But especially, we miss the ones where someone has gone awry and is antisocial or doing something that is harmful to others. What do? We immediately, society does, jump in to punish them. War and peace, war and peace, war and peace. So the true student always on receive. And a true student is not particularly selective about what they're receiving. Whatever they're receiving, especially if it's a spiritual path, if one is receiving teachings from the Buddha, from the teachings, from reading the Digha Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, or any of the foundation texts, or later texts of the Mahayana, read those and receive them, receive what it is. Don't jump away from what it is to try to analyze it. You actually prevent yourself from seeing what is being pointed at by thinking that you can look at something like the Diamond Sutra and figure it out. Why do we keep chanting that? I don't know what it means. Why do they chant that in Japanese? I don't know what it means. Well, you don't even know what it means in English. Because what it means, the way those words are put together in the sutras, they're deliberately bringing concepts together in such a way that it will spark some kind of deep, deep understanding of your true nature. That is already the case, that you're covering up out of fear, out of hope, out of otherness, out of wanting control, out of not wanting that much space, some kind of agoraphobia going on about just too much room and need more security. There was a book, I think it was Pema Chodron's books, named one of her books, The Wisdom of Insecurity, if I recall. The security is not going to be fun, but from the perspective of the spiritual path, it is an indication that you're going towards what has been called wisdom, or prajna, or jhana, or jnana, however you want to pronounce it. Wisdom. What is wisdom? And will a true student actually be able to understand, see, grok, comprehend, perceive wisdom? No. That's conventional education. I'm not saying there aren't incredible scholars, Jeffrey Hopkins, Carl Bielefeld, no other ones are coming to name, but there's so many scholars that are incredibly good at deconstructing this material in such a way that it just magnetizes you right into it. And it is a way of looking at the Buddha Dharma in a conceptual way, a constructed way, and laying it out in such a way that you can look more deeply into it with concepts. The challenge there is we get so in love with those concepts about it that we don't see what it's pointing at. As I say often, because it's such a common tradition in Zen, the finger pointing at the moon. If you're tied up, you're in love with the finger, you're in love with instructions, then you won't see the moon. When I say it in love, I don't mean appreciative or fundamental love. I mean attached, craving, grasping love, that kind. So the true student is going to be open, having a willingness to not know, and not a greediness to come to some kind of damn conclusion, instead of wandering around like, I don't really know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what this means. I don't understand the Diamond Sutra. Why would you say it's this and it's not this, therefore it's this? It's that, but it's not that, therefore it's that. Why would you do that to anyone? How is that education? It's not education in the conventional sense. It's a spiritual path. It's helping you or me to look closely into anything, your assumptions about anything. Look at the assumption. As I often say, what you're looking for is right in front of you. But it is covered up with your presumptions about what you're looking at. Every time you look in someone else's face, if you see someone else, this is delusion. Simply put. Go ahead, Shoka.
Shokabang, in the example of the fire truck, what is it about that situation that is so frightening to the ego?
It's frightening in that, if I understand your question, it's frightening in that we need to name and categorize and pigeonhole everything in order to feel safe, because we are identified with a body-mind complex that is unreal. And reality knows it's unreal. Wisdom knows it's unreal. But the self-centered, grasping, clinging, hanging on mind is looking for some kind of reference point, something to believe in. This is why the theistic approaches to spiritual path are not as workable. Not that you couldn't realize what this is through a theistic approach. It's possible. Less likely. More?
Shokabang, how does being a student show up differently along the path?
For who?
For the student.
How do you mean differently? You mean day to day or 3-month segments? What do you mean?
Shokabang, it's something that it's a question I've been reflecting on lately. Is as
you've been reflecting on?
Yeah.
What are you coming up with?
The question.
That's all you got? It's a question? That's good enough. What is it?
Does being a student show up differently as one continues along the spiritual
path? Yes, and it can go any number of ways. You can become more and more devoted and dedicated, sincerely and open to the teachings, to the teacher, to the community as you go along. If I'm understanding you. And you can also kind of hang out in some kind of a neutral area, so you don't have to really make any decisions, or just kind of dog paddle. Nothing against dogs, or you could actually start to get more and more threatened by the teaching, and eventually drop out of the whole thing. Find any little excuse to get away from that teacher or that teaching, because it's too much. You won't even know you're afraid. Because real fear gets covered up in an instant by ego. Not looking at that. More? Good question.
Shokabang, how can there be so much fear without knowing what we're afraid of?
Well, if you know what you're afraid of, it's not near as scary. Like if there was a buffalo outside the building, and you looked out the window and saw it, it's a buffalo, it's outside the building, it doesn't know how to turn the doorknob. But if you hear something out in the yard that's making a sound like that, you might be more afraid because you don't have enough information around that, so it could be frightening. Kind of a dumb example, but you're not very smart, so I can use that kind.
That leads into my next question.
That leads into your next question. Okay. Okay. Come ahead, true student.
Earlier, you were talking about education in relation to memorizing.
Yes.
What is learning when you don't have a good memory?
Well, you mean like me? It doesn't work very good. It doesn't work in the conventional education system. So I'm not sure what do you want to know?
Shokubang, I guess, do we need memory in order to learn?
Well, I think we do. We need to have, but everyone's memory is so much different. Some people just, but I'm looking to see if he's here. Dr. Hirsch, are you here anywhere? Don't see him. No, anyway, Mark Hirsch is a student of mine that comes on who went through medical school quite early and told me in several ways that he was just able to memorize everything. His memory was extremely sharp. So in that way, he could pass any kind of tests and take the information he was memorizing and apply it to any situation, so on. So memory, but I don't know. Maybe there's a possibility of training memory. I don't know if there is. So, but with this situation, this path, you have more? You.
I'm looking for it.
Okay. So this path is about, it's not that we don't need memory, but the idea of getting information just so we can pass a test or just so we can get a degree or something kind of gets in the way of the fundamental objective of getting an education in a particular field. Even though you could justify it, you can rationalize it and say, well, you can't just let people do this without testing them, can you? Yeah, you could. There'd be other ways of doing it. If you have time, read a book by A.S. Neal called Summerhill, written back in the 50s sometime. Interesting book. It's not conclusive, but it's still a very interesting book about education. Go ahead.
Shadowbowing. If we are someone that did all right in that memory-based education, does that need to fall apart a bit to be a true student?
It may. It's a good question. You have a good memory, and you, as I remember you talking, you did well in school. You have a degree, and so to some extent, we tend to if we start to get frightened or get a little uneasy or a little anxious, which happens on the spiritual path, we look for some kind of relative a touchstone or some kind of a reference point that stabilizes us, and our education, our memory, our title, our what have you, will helps us in that way not feel quite so threatened, so we can continue. But it doesn't help us as far as the spiritual path. The spiritual path is about going right into that material. More?
Sure, you brought up 3 examples of how the student might change on the path.
Yes. And
one of them was the fear might increase to where we might go away. If we see that fear increasing, can we turn that back towards devotion?
Yes, I think it's necessary to. I think you can, but it's necessary to do it without particular expectation. Have a willingness to do it. Just the way I say it, it sounds kind of maybe even a little corny, but I said just do it anyway. What else are you going to do with your life? You don't know if you've got more lives or not. It can end at any moment. So, more?
All right, thank you.
Go ahead,
Shokubang, what does it look like to march directly into that fear?
So, I was quoting Trungpa Rinpoche. I would just say, just receive the fear. I wouldn't necessarily operate by marching directly into it. I kind of understand his metaphor. He's also teaching to thousands of people. I'm teaching to a couple of dozen, which I get to speak personally to any one of you anytime if you so wish. So I look at it as when fear comes up, when any kind of negative, positive, neutral feeling comes up, don't do anything with it. Let it explain itself. But don't take the feeling and start talking about it, blaming yourself, anybody else, or situations, even though it's relatively true. That's why it's so damn difficult, is because relative truth, it's so easy to take relative truth and just disprove the spiritual path. That can't work. It just doesn't make any sense. It's irrational. This is why some scholars have spent so many hours trying to use concepts to prove pratitya samutpada, dependent origination, as is done in lots of different material. Go ahead.
Shokabowing, when that fear does arise and there's like an immediate barrier that arises with it, is there any way to soften or to receive that more directly?
Yes, and I think it's going to show up differently with each person. It's a good question. And with one person, it might be spend more time facing the wall. With another person, it might be go another direction, take a break, go for a walk, or go do something else for a while, distract yourself deliberately. If you're doing something deliberately with intention, then it isn't the same as actually reacting to something and running away or trying to cover something up. If you actually look at it and you relate to it directly, then you might back away from it, possible. Or you might decide to, using Trungpa Rinpoche's idea, march directly into disappointment. Go and take all that baloney to the wall, sit down, hold still, and look deeply into the texture of that negativity. Because the texture of the negativity is not the word negativity, and it's not the word depression, and it's not any kind of word or concept or any kind of explanation around it. Those may be relatively true, but to look at this deeply is beginning to transcend relative truth, the alternating truth and lie, war and peace, up and down, back and forth, life and death. That's the big illusion. Even though the teachings say death comes without warning, this body will be a corpse. At that time, the Dharma will be my only help. I must examine my mind with exertion, or however the wording went. Sir?
Shokabowing, what is fear when we're not labeling it?
I think there's probably different levels to that. I think if you begin to experience fear without doing anything with it, it could get worse, because the labeling it fear actually backs it off some. So I'm afraid, of saying I'm afraid, just like yelling about any expression, any emotion that comes up, to abandon the expression with, or abandon what appears in the mind stream or the life stream with changing that energy of what's arising into something else is the very nature of the confusion and duality. It's the very nature of warfare. Nothing with it. Receive everything. Be a good student. If you're a student of the Buddha's Dharma, sometimes we say surrender. Sometimes we talk about humility or being humble, losing face. If you lose face, don't go pick it up. Leave the damn face laying there. You don't really need it. You don't need the artificial identity of ego. It just looks like it. And when it starts to collapse, or someone criticizes you or accuses you of not knowing what you're doing, that's your opportunity. That's a Dharma gate for you, rather than for you to defend yourself and fight back or hold your ground, all that baloney. I would say, if this makes no sense to you, then why listen to me? If it doesn't make any sense, when I say sense, some kind of deep understanding about, you need to look at your mind. You don't need to think more. You already think enough, probably. You need to look at it. I can't do it for you. You can't do it for someone else, but you can at least not get in somebody's way. if they're endeavoring to train their mind. You could support them. It's difficult to look at something like fear or anxiety that is a big knot in your stomach, or a rock or something, or jealousy that it just won't go away. It doesn't need to go away. It is unreal. This doesn't mean it doesn't really, really hurt. So the misconception there with when people have really negative feelings, they try to get rid of the feeling rather than realize that the identity, the swabhava, or the apparent identity, is unreal. So rather than seeing what is fundamentally unreal is the person who's experiencing that is unreal. I'm not saying it isn't happening in a body-mind complex in your whole sensorium. Of course it is. It's dependently arisen. And it needs to be there. How do you know? It's there. That's how you know. You don't need to change anything, get rid of anything. What do you need to do? See it clearly. See it clearly. Look at it. Look at everything it arises and see it. This is all the Buddha did. Not to minimize what he did. It was amazing what he did, especially in that century. But at least he had the support of the society that basically was pro spiritual path. But
Shadow bowing. If our negativity is showing up and we're not labeling it, or we're not jumping to our usual cover up, and it's really in our face,
yeah,
at that point, how do we see that that's not real?
You think it's real?
I don't like it.
That sounds good. I don't like it. That's okay. Don't go any further than that. Don't try to convince yourself that's not real. Don't try to, if you saw a wolf run behind a tree, don't go behind the tree. See? You like those Zen ideas? Real Zen-y? Bill Rockwell, you have a question? Okay. Any questions out there in Zoom area? Augie.
Augie Bowing. Some of us as students are avid note takers. And on a spiritual path, is that a trap of some kind?
No, take notes. Take notes. Unyo, let's see your notebook. This is Unyo's, this is my wife's notebook. That's how I know what I said. No, I don't enforce it, but I'm not going to enforce it. But I think, yeah, taking notes is, few people take notes, but you don't have to. It's very helpful. She's been going to these Dharma talks for 11 years. And I tend to run my mouth a lot. But she's got boxes and boxes of notebooks, not to mention all the recordings, but actual notebooks. So does that help you to do that? Yeah, helps her. So yeah, take notes. And even Trungpa Rinpoche encouraged people to take notes. One of the nice things about Trungpa is when he gave a talk, he talked so slow, you could just about write everything down verbatim. I have one somewhere where I wrote down every word he said in a book back in the 70s sometime. But yes, take notes. Good idea. Junchu?
Question from Shane in Virginia.
Shane? Better be good, Shane.
In what ways can a true student and a true teacher interact to help others? That's the first one.
Damned if I know. Go figure out a way.
The next part is, what does that look like to a student who endeavors to see the truth?
Your questions have some validity to it, but they're so circular. I mean, I can't have a conversation about that with you. You could do that, but it's just conversational. It's just more stuff and interpretation about it. The true student and the true teacher, it's hard to say what will happen there. Anything is possible. If that is happening, if that kind of a dynamic, whether it's a human being who has realized their true nature and a student who is inspired by that teacher or by the teachings of the Buddha's Dharma, and they come together, then that student's journey begins. And the true teacher isn't going anywhere, because they aren't anywhere but here. They aren't anyone but the student. They're no longer a separate being. It's not something to believe in. I'm not promoting that. I'm just talking about it conceptually so you can get a feeling of what it feels like to not have any separate identity from anything. It can look even more egotistical. This is why it's called the crazy wisdom form of the Buddhas of the three times. It can look crazy. And that, the downside of that is it can be scary. The upside of that is it scares enough people away so that the true teacher doesn't get overloaded.
A question from Chris Smith.
Chris.
Have you taught anyone with a higher sensory perception? How does one live in society with a mindset like yours?
I don't have a mindset. I don't have a mind. I don't have a mind. It's not a bragging point. There's a mind, but it doesn't belong to anyone. And it's no different than your mind, except yours, not just as necessarily you, Chris, have not met you, I don't think. It can look incredibly erudite and smart and perceptive and understanding and be able to make up all kinds of ideas about the nature of reality and so on. But to realize what this is, everything collapses, everything falls away. And everything that remains or that's still there is not separate. But all the ideas, the configurations that caused hope and fear and terror about who you were and who everybody else was, falls away. And you don't have to push it away. It falls away. Why? Because you see it. You're aware of it. And why are you aware? The Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the three jewels would be a structure for you to support your awareness practice. And then, of course, the awareness practice, besides whatever it may be, chanting the sutras, sitting in front of a wall for hours on end, watching the mind, what it does. Get to know yourself. Get to know deeply how the mind works yourself, because you have to enlighten yourself. The teacher can hit you in the head with a stick. And that will only work if you just spent the last dozen years meditating. And even then, there's no guarantee. You might just get a lump on the head. What?
A question from Ted Smith.
Ted? Okay.
What is truth?
What is truth? I don't know. It's like, what is love? I think I gave a talk where I talked about all the different kinds of love. I could give a talk talking about all the different kinds of truth. There's the truth that's a lie, and then there's the half truth, and then there's what's that one? I really like that one. Truthiness. Yeah. What was it that made that up? What comedian? Truthiness. That might be something that has truthiness, and it's kind of truth, but it's kind of true, but it's not actually true because all parts of it are baloney. So, but even baloney is true if you like baloney. I'm not sure if I'm helping you at all. And I realize your inspiration to ask that, maybe just to see, I wonder what that guy'd say about that kind of a question. Well, I don't know. It's a concept about the nature of existence and non-existence. And from the point of view of the Buddha Dharma, as I understand it, you can't find anything that exists or non-exists. Existence, non-existence, night and day, up and down, back and forth. All the polarities are unreal. Unreal. Not that they're not there, but they're unreal. In other words, they have no substantiality. They will fade away. They'll die out, even though they're there for 30 seconds or 30 years. Will not last. All compounded things will vanish, to quote the Buddha. questions? Kelly says something somewhere. Okay, Kelly, hang on a minute. Let me start up with Slav's bowing, how to apply Shikantaza practice to real life. I mean, everyday life, I would say, face the wall a lot, do it many hours a day, every day. And so that Shikantaza practice, the clarity around what is arising without adding, subtracting, dividing, the clarity around what is hanging out without adding, subtracting, or dividing, and the clarity around that which goes away with no commentary at all, no elaboration, that strengthens that aspect of the mind that is just consciousness without particular objects. So then when you get up off the cushion and go out into your everyday life, or your real life as you're calling it, you're more likely, there's more of a chance, no guarantee of anything, but there's more of a chance that you'll see more clearly, deeply into what's happening. I'll give you an example. Someone that might you have difficulty with, that might come to you and maybe be kind of insulting to you or unfair to you. Perhaps before any kind of practice, that might have been somebody you would resent or feel aggression towards, or maybe didn't say anything, but you would just be reactive towards it. Whereas with sitting practice of meditation, you have perhaps not realized your true nature, but you might be less likely to fight or argue or blame that person, because you would see more clearly, more deeply into their situation and see the degree to which they're suffering. This is how people get rid of their suffering, is with whatever, anything from flipping you off to an AK-47. They get rid of that because the whole buildup of just anger, and it covers up someone who is deeply afraid. Those of us who know we're afraid, we're terrorized by this or nervous about that, but we're not covering that up by being a complete nuisance to other people. Wait, I'm getting overwhelmed here. Let me go back to Kelly. Kelly is truthiness is Stephen Colbert. That's true. Is Stephen Colbert. Thank you, Kelly. And he's the only person that can really use that word in a context where it actually transcends the world we all think is real, with humor. So somebody is saying, could you help me with this so I can...
I can read that for you.
Okay, thank you. I'll get it off the screen then. Go ahead. Thank you.
From Katie. She said, Katie bowing. She doesn't have a microphone right now. I often find myself oversharing in conversations when I don't want to. Each time I resolve to just listen, then something happens and I feel roped in and start babbling BS, then immediately regret it. How do I stop this circle? Bowing.
Well, one thing, I can congratulate you because you're real aware of the mechanics of that. You just talked about it, how I get roped in. So sit a lot, of course, which I know you already do. And then the other thing is be aware of the rope. You used the metaphor. Be aware of that rope. You can see it. If you're really on receive, you will see the rope leading out, reaching out to you. And the other thing you can notice is that you have an intention about making sure that the people think you're agreeable or think you're conversational. You might have some, I'm not accusing you of anything, but you might want to look at your intention. Is your intention to be clear and to be direct and be sincere? Or is your intention to fill up the room with your chatter or your responses? Or don't make no response. Someone asks you a direct question about something, look at them. Then you might find that they might drop the whole thing, might walk away. Or they might say, did you hear me? And you could say, yes, I heard you. And then they might say, well, what do you think about that? And you could actually say, I don't know, I don't think about it much. I'm not trying to say that giving you ammunition to be insulting to people, but some kind of idea where you can lower the heat there, so you don't feel so compulsive or impulsive, maybe, about making sure you're responding to people. As I sometimes say, make them drag it out of you. Further question? Hondo,
Window bowing. How do we receive teaching from a teacher who is not separate from us?
well, if it's a true teacher is not separate from you. So that's just turn that way and ask questions and then receive the question. Ask questions, or it's so different with each person. Shoto receives from me by I give him things to do, and he goes and builds stuff.
Window bowing. How do we work with a teacher who sees not separate and is not separate from us?
I don't know what you mean by work with it. You're doing it. How do you work with it? I don't know what you mean, work with it. I make no claims. I teach as directly as I can, but I don't particularly set myself up. And you could say, well, yeah, you do. You're a monk and you're ordained, and you're wearing stuff, Buddha jewelry, and you're sitting next to a big gold leaf statue of the Buddha and all of that. So there's something happening here. It's an environment where this kind of message can be communicated and has been done for thousands of years. I avoided this as long as I could. Yes.
Window bowing. It seems like there's some vulnerability that we can experience working with a true teacher who is not separate from us.
That you can feel vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I would say you could talk about that. Everybody feels vulnerable.
So
go ahead.
Chogyam said, march into
Disappointment.
disappointment. Is there a practice in?
Yes, it's something you do that has no apparent outcome to it. Chanting the sutras, prostration practice, studying the texts that we do, to have 12 different book studies a week, where we're studying some part of the Buddha's Dharma from some school or some location or some time and place. And you don't get tested. You don't know if you're getting anywhere. More?
What can the student bring to the teacher?
Everything. Everything. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I'm saying that in a negative way, but it's like, of course, bring everything. That doesn't mean you have to turn over your checkbook to the teacher. I'm not saying there aren't some teachers that might want you to do that. I don't know if they'd be true teachers if that was part of their method of operation. Go ahead.
Bowing, is there anything that a student produces? You're saying that we should receive. That is our
Receive the teaching.
receiving the teachings.
Everything, this has been said way before I got here. If it's a true teacher, then everything the teacher does is a teaching. Everything. But you have to be a true student, or if you're taking exceptions, or if you're looking at what the teacher's doing and thinking, I don't know what he's doing there. I don't know about that situation. And it's happened in our community, as you know. And I would say, don't do anything unless you have to. Just something looks suspicious or something, maybe you should just believe your suspicions. Go do something else. Go ahead, keep coming. Don't stop. What are you doing here? Let's put it right in your face. What are you doing here?
I want to see what you see.
How do you know I see anything?
Truth. I hear truth. I see someone who sees the truth.
How do you know you're not just imputing that and making it up? I'm just some kind of a charlatan trying to control you.
I do not know that.
Aha. Is there some way you could know that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so then what are you actually doing then?
I'm listening to a teacher. I'm not believing, disbelieving, or looking away.
Would you call that trust?
I feel like I trust you.
Okay, well, yeah, but there's no proof. Because your insight is not separate from the insight of the teacher. And if that starts to resonate, then you'll just continue. You'll continue to practice. Not easy. Not many people are able to even do this. People might listen in, follow along a little bit, but it can get difficult because you feel like you're turning over, as I did with the Vidyadhara, Trungpa Rinpoche. I felt like I'm turning over my own autonomy. I was very resentful of it because I felt like he had a hold of me by the throat. I was so devoted to him. But it was, my ego mind is, I don't want to do this. I can't do this, but I have to do this because if I don't do this, I have no other options left. I have to do this. So I did for decades. More?
Buddha, it seems like there's a desire to produce something for the teacher in return for the teaching, in return for the
I can tell you exactly what to do. Practice. Practice. You already do that. You practice a lot. Most everyone in this room practices a lot, besides sometimes holding down a full-time job. Well, there are other kinds of devotion, other ways of being devoted, of course, but practice. Get your butt to the cushion, to the wall, come in. It's set up, if you practiced every minute here, it would be, what, five days a week anyway. It's 4 days a week. I think it's 6.5 hours a day. And then Thursdays, it's 8 hours. 2 block sets. Are you required to do that? No, you should do whatever you want to do. Of course, if you live here, and if you live in a monastery, and in your case, you're sewing your robe to be a monk, then you're on track to do this. This is what you're going to do. More?
divine. You wanted to ask a question about the value of our questions. You say that you are not aware of what you're going to say, and you're very interested in us asking questions about a particular topic. So like today's topic, you were saying, I want to hear what I have to say about this.
I do, but I don't know what I'm saying. This is your topic. I think that when I don't know what, I ask a few people, and there's several boneheads in here that just don't know anything. You must not be a bonehead. Everybody's smiling, so they think of it as humorous. I'm happy to hear that. So you said, why don't you talk about a true, what is a true student? And so that's what I'm endeavoring to do, based on what you said a couple hours ago.
Divine, it seems like we can bring questions or something to the talk.
Aren't you doing that? What?
And I'm endeavoring to do that.
I would say so. As is everyone else who's asked questions. The only person that doesn't quite get there is Shane. I love Shane, and he knows it. I'm just highly critical of Shane. Go ahead. Oh, come on. Stop there. It's devotion. Devotion, the teaching person doesn't need anything. If they need something, probably not a true teacher. If they require anything, if they demand anything, and I'm not talking about, I'm not validating the demands of tantric gurus or masters, that ancient practice of whatever the guru says that I will do. That's not necessary. That's 13th century. For that society, that does not work in the society. It may have worked in a medieval context, but not in this one. Yes.
Audubon, can students bring demands
Can they demand something
from the teacher?
of the teacher? Unya does. There could be requests. I don't know if there's a demand. I don't think it works that way, right? But the teacher's also not demanding, this teacher's not making any demands on anybody at all. More. Sent you. I mean, Junchu, there's the Shoe Sisters. How can I rationalize my way out of this? No, it's a mistake, isn't it? But there are no mistakes. Okay, there are no mistakes. Go ahead, Junchu.
Question from School String in the UK.
Spool string again. Huh.
Is there a difference between Zen and Pure Land Buddhism?
I don't know. Probably quite a bit. You know, you can go on, Wikipedia does a very good job of just clarifying all that. And, you know, and I'm not a scholar. And even Zen, different ways of teaching Zen. There are other Zen temples in Michigan. They're not doing anything near what is being done here. But that doesn't mean that they're incorrect. It just means that each teacher of Zen teaches out of how they see, how they understand what this is. Zen just means mind or heart mind. So Pure Land is a little bit more idealistic and a little bit more, a little bit closer to a theistic approach to it. Not totally that, but somewhat. And Zen is, as I understand it, is just working with the mind as it is. Yes.
A question from Ian Zichterman. What's the difference between strengthening the awareness and stabilizing the mind?
Stabilizing using shamatha practice or a shine or resting in tranquility or calm abiding is a initial practice that is sometimes taught, that I learned, to just stabilize, follow the breath, label thinking, or follow the out breath, the in breath, even count the breaths, even close the eyes sometimes. And that's a way of stabilizing what we call the mind or the consciousness, so that it's not much is happening there. Some, but it's fairly stable. And strengthening the awareness is about watching what moves. And it's not that some calm abiding or some shamatha, mindfulness practice, isn't valuable. I just don't teach it as an approach. I teach shikantaza, and then an individual person I may talk to, I may, depending on what's happening with them, I might tighten that up for them or help them. We do it mutually. I would say, maybe you could follow your breath for the first 10 or 20 minutes of your meditation, and maybe even have your eyes closed for a while. It depends on what's happening with the person. So it could be, and as far as I'm concerned, is situational. There's no standard that's set up. I say shikantaza, and I teach it because there's no structure there, so you find out right away what the person needs to do. If they can continue to do shikantaza, which I recommend, but if they can't, if that's difficult, then they could modify that a little bit. Make it so they can stay in front of the wall rather than get upset about it.
Another question from Spool String.
Yes.
When I ask a question, am I declaring that I exist? And is this stupid?
Yeah, it is. I don't know what else to say, because you're working it all out for me. So I might as well just say, well, okay, I don't know what else is going on there, Spool String. But, we're getting into some kind of existential jargon about so the existential jargon, I'm not really criticizing you. I'm just saying that it's just too, my recommendation, if you're open to that, if you're saying, what should I do, then train your mind. do some block sitting, sit from 4-hour segments, a couple times a week. And then along with your daily sitting, which I'm assuming you're doing, sit some strong, so there's long periods of not doing anything but sitting there. No breath counting, nothing, other than going to the bathroom or something like that. Do that. And then this kind of low-level philosophical questions, which they're interesting, and it's great for maybe for conversational stuff sometimes, but it doesn't work in this regard. And don't misunderstand, I don't think you're being disrespectful. I'm just saying that train your mind. When I hear a question like that, I just want to say, my son. School string's a man, right? Yeah, that's why I said that then. My son, train your mind. Sit down, hold still, watch the movement. Get to know yourself. Don't know yourself through what other people think or what you think about what other people are thinking about what you're thinking, or what other people are thinking about what you're thinking that they're thinking. Follow me? Sure you do. Go ahead, Augie.
Augie Bowing, why does the student need to bring their ego and paranoia to the teacher if the teacher already sees it clearly?
Because it's devotion. The devotion is just energy. The student brings their, you could call it love or devotion or intention, or, you know, I don't know, there's several other words and they tend to get a little bit theistic, but it's not really that. It's you're bringing something, your craziness or your self-centeredness or your pride or your shame, you're bringing that to the teacher. You're exposing yourself to the teacher. And so that way you can, nothing comes back to you other than the teaching. Whatever energy you bring this way, that energy, that same energy will come right back to you, because not separate. And again, as I said before, it's very situational. So if somebody's a student of mine that I've never met face to face, I'm not saying a person couldn't be a student. I have several students I've never met and have been students of mine for years. So I'm not saying it's impossible to do that. It is possible. Each person is so different, very different.
Augie Bowing, how do I begin to do that? How?
Well, this is a start right here. If you're talking about this being your teacher, or yeah, just continue to. We can't. We can't. You can always start right now. Always start right now. Everything's starting right now. Further questions?
Shadow bowing. In your questions back to Ondo, I was looking
Her?
at, yes.
Okay.
Looking at even if we're giving you credentials as a true teacher, you don't make those claims yourself. Is that our ego creating credentials?
Doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in the sense that it's ego, or are they really there? Credentials are just that. They're something about something else to cover up what's actually there. It's a credential. Buddha Dharma without credentials. There are no credentials. If, as I sometimes said, I've been saying this off and on for years, if I sat out in the parking lot, turned a garbage can upside down and sat on it in camouflage shorts and wore a straw hat, and you know, I might get some students, but I can think of a few homeless people I would get. Is that incorrect? No, it's just that they just wouldn't want my money or want my straw hat or something. So there needs to be some kind of a structure for the teaching to take place. And then the teacher, he, she, or they need to know when to teach, what they're going to talk about, and who they're talking to. Simply put. And then the teaching will occur. But fundamentally, there isn't a person here and a person there, but there's no real being here anywhere. And if you see that, then you're not perplexed. You're not, what's that other word, flummoxed by anything. Anything. Nothing is really confusing to you. It's not that you know how to play chess. It's not that you're are good at what's that other wonderful popular game, Parcheesi. I don't think that's been popular since the 30s. If it ever was. More?
Shoto bowing. Or should we even try to work with not giving credentials?
More? What?
Does the credentials that we give to you get in the way of what you're teaching?
What are you saying? You're giving me? I mean, I'm a Buddhist monk. That's a credential, but it's also something that, because of the vow, binds you to this path, to the path of the Mahayana, to put others before yourself, save all beings, put everyone before yourself. This doesn't mean disregard things and put everything to yourself to your advantage, so that you look like a person who's putting everyone before them, for yourself. So it's not about how you show up. It's without credentials. There's no congratulation. There are no merit badges. But we need some forms. So I have a teaching stick. I have a purple robe, which is of a transmitted priest, of someone who has been, blessed with whatever. Yeah, go ahead, teach. So there are credentials there, but it's the attachment to the credentials and the kind of puffing up around the credential. I am this, or I am that. Go ahead.
Sure, that puffing up is something I recognize me like doing on your behalf, like where he is this or he is the true teacher, and I've noticed that it makes me not so open to other people when they teach, or not wanting to receive things from other people.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the monks that are teaching here once a month, and they're going to teach on Saturday, you need to help those monks, your Dharma brothers and sisters, by receiving that teaching and asking questions or give them feedback to help them. So it should be other people's teaching should be, especially in our Sangha, our community, should be very interesting to you. Had somebody recently asked, do we have any training for monks? What do you guys think? Are you being trained? Everybody's grinning. Yeah, you're getting more training than a lot of monks. So there are other monks. More?
Shoto bowing. How do we step into that curiosity?
Just do it deliberately. Just intend. You have a vow. You received a vow to be with all things. Do good, don't do harm. The 3 pure precepts. Those are the simple way of putting it. Do good as you see it. Don't create problems as you see it. And be with all things. That doesn't agree with all things. I mean, just be with whatever's happening, which also to personalize it is save all beings, put others before yourself. Until you realize there aren't any beings. There's no this. There's no one here. No one here. There's no one out there. If you see it, you'll know. You won't even come to me. You won't even come and say, Sokuzan, I think I see it. But I'm not sure. Is there some way you can validate this for me? I was like, if you need validation, you didn't see it. It's certain. You are certain, and you're not certain because it's a either or. It's not either or. Leave that back there with Kierkegaard. Either or, the sickness unto death. Leave that back there. Leave it with other ways of working with the mind, using the intellect. See it. It's a direct seeing of what this is. Sure.
You mind if we bring the teacher our vulnerabilities? Is this the intention of the path?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not a confessional. It doesn't mean you have to say that. The teacher might not even know might not even be aware of what it is that you're dealing with, but you can just do it yourself. Just do it. Do prostration. Do dedicate yourself to it. I think it's so unique and so different with each person. One of the upside of all the traditional ways where standards are set up, where you're going to do 100,000 prostration, you're going to do 100,000 repetitions of the Vajrasattva mantra, you're going to 100,000 offerings to the mandala, and 1,000,000 repetitions of Guru Yoga for His Holiness Karmapa. Okay, just do all that. And while you're doing it, you find that you're doing all these forms, you find that you can't help but begin to generate devotion towards the teaching person. It's powerful. And then also the teaching person, in my situation, was Trungpa Rinpoche before I met Koban, and was just giving him everything I could. And I had plenty of difficulty, neurosis, craziness, insanity, wanting to end my life. Not that other people don't have this also, but that, I don't know if he took it or whatever. I don't know what all I told him. I can't remember. All I know that he helped me. He didn't do much. He just, yes.
Another question from Ian Zichterman in Kalamazoo.
Yes, Ian.
What is it to bring everything to you? Is it different than a confessional?
Yeah, it's not a confessional at all. As I just said to Kyun, I might not have any idea. Or you might, some students I'm very close to, so I have I know a lot about what's happening with their personal lives. But I have other students that tell me some things and don't tell me others, but there's no right or wrong to it. It's so different, Ian. There's no standard where you can live up to, even though the Tibetans tried to set it up, as did the other schools of Buddhism say, this is the way you do it, and this is the only way, and this is the right way. And if you want to attain enlightenment, you've got to study the Vajrayana. So I studied the Vajrayana. Where's my enlightenment? I want to be enlightened. Yes, go ahead.
A question from Isaac Leon.
Isaac, good to hear from you.
Is bipolar disorder real? If so, can it be stabilized through a dedicated practice?
So that's a good question, Isaac, but it's complicated because the causes and conditions that arise in something that science calls bipolar, in other words, making a statement about a particular condition of someone having that kind of a, let me ask, do you have another word for bipolar, either one of you, in your therapy practice? Is there anything else that would qualify that? Do you?
Or just mental health challenges.
Okay, but nothing that talks about the duality of it.
Depression and manic episodes.
Yeah, that would be you too. Yeah. So I'm not trying to redefine the whole thing. I'm just saying that meditation practice could address that, but there's no guarantee, because we don't know if there's something in your physiology that is also adding to that difficulty. Anything from your heredity, what you came into this life with. There's just so many untraceable. I mean, we can look a little bit, but they're basically untraceable. The food you're eating is affecting you. I'm not here to promote what you should eat, but you could look at that. You could look at that, and the medications you take that are meant to help you sometimes may not be. I'm not against medications. I'm not against therapists sitting right in front of me. I need them. I need to have these therapists here all the time. Otherwise, I don't know what I'd do. So Ian, I would say, I can't really comment on that, but I think there's a possibility that intense sitting practice with the guidance of a teacher and the support of teachings, in other words, learning the concepts that help stabilize that aspect of the mind, because it gives the ego something to chew on besides just the bologna sandwiches that it keeps getting from hope and fear. You should do that. Maybe you should do that. You shouldn't do that. What if you did that and that? What if that happened and then you did that? That's not going to work. I can't do that. What am I thinking about? Am I doing a good imitation of bipolar? No, not good. So you've been bipolar, so you know. Is that how you know about bipolar? Because you've been bipolar, or because you've studied bipolar?
I see many clients who have been given the diagnosis of bipolar,
You-
and it turns into it really is childhood trauma.
Trauma,
A lot
something
of trauma that
something might have happened to them.
mhm. So it's not bipolar.
Has
really.
nothing to do with their sun sign.
Has nothing to do with their sun sign, and definitely not their mental health so much as.
Okay, so all I'm saying, I'm not trying to make light of your question. I think it's a fantastic question, and I guess what I could say that I think would be encouraging is do it. You find out. Do some sitting meditation. You don't have to do 4 or 5 hours a day or something like that, but you could do a little bit of it and just watch and just notice, especially shikantaza. If you can't do shikantaza, then do close your eyes and follow your breath a little bit, or leave your eyes open and follow your breath, but find some way of possibly stabilizing. The bipolar situation might need more of a stabilizing practice for a while rather than the completely open dimension of shikantaza, which might encourage what is called bipolar or just difficulty with your stability.
One last question from you two, from Chris Smith again.
Yes,
How does one become a teacher?
by being a student, and be a student forever. If you think that you graduate from being a student to being a teacher, it's a misunderstanding. Fundamentally, there's no difference between a student and a teacher. No difference. There are differences, but fundamentally no difference. In the spiritual path, when the student eventually, the mind, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, and it's said in the Tibetan tradition, the mind of the student and the mind of the teacher merge. But I would say it this way: they're seen as not being separate. No merging happens. They're seen that they're fundamentally, you're fundamentally not separate from your teacher. Johan, go ahead.
Yuhong Baoing. I have 3 questions. The first question, how can I look at myself as a true student? Baoing.
So look at the doubts that you may not be a true student. So rather than try to make yourself be a true student, look at the area which might be kind of a spontaneous taking your inventory or judging yourself. So, and you can also ask your teacher, is this your teacher here? Yeah, ask this teacher in a Sokuzan or interview. That would be a good way to do it, not in public. Further question?
Yuhong Baoing, thank you. My second question is, as a true teacher, what is your confidence, and where's your confidence from to teach us?
So the confidence has no foundation. It has no conditions. It's unconditional, and it goes beyond the conditionality. It goes beyond hope and fear, life and death, up and down, back and forth, success and failure. It includes everything. I sometimes say, be a transcendental pack rat. Don't get rid of anything. You're going to need it. So if it looks like confidence, it's not confidence because I'm such a successful Dharma teacher and I have so many wonderful students, even though I do. But it's not that kind of confidence. It's choiceless. What I do is choiceless. I don't make choices anymore. I did at one time, or at least I thought I did. I wasn't even making them then. That's a big realization, is to realize that everything is choiceless. Your last question, Yuhong?
Yuhong Baoing, can we be our own true teachers and students? Baoing.
I think it's less likely for that to happen. It could, It's less likely because the ego is so shrewd at usurping the whole situation for itself and functioning and convincing the rest of your consciousness that you can do this by yourself, that you can do it without a teacher. So I think it's possible. Some people have had a spontaneous realization and have awakened without any practice at all. Very few, from what I understand, but it's hard to say what's happened to every single person. But the ones that have written books on it or become well known, looks like they had a rough time without having a teacher, without being sure what was actually happening to them. So having the teacher allows you to, how would you say it, have a mentor or have someone that as you're practicing, things can get worse and worse, more and more threatening, more and more difficult. But if you have someone who, this is what was difficult for me when I started, I really needed to have somebody that I could take what was happening. I have no idea what I said to Rinpoche, but take what was happening and then, receive some encouragement. That's what I got from him. I didn't get anything but encouragement, a lot of encouragement. And as I've said, sometimes I only had 4 private interviews with him where I was able to spill my guts, so to speak. That doesn't mean that you need to come and to me or to your teacher, if you have a teacher somewhere, some other direction, and spill your guts to them. I needed to do that because I was especially insane. I needed to do that. Shall we close? Okay, we're going to dedicate the merit. Please join us with this.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Chi-ho san chi hu chi-son bu sa mo sa the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy